My name is Jason Higgins, and I am an intern with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I'm in Stillwater at the OSU Library to interview Lieutenant Colonel Steven Cherrington to discuss his experiences serving in the United States Air Force. This is part of the Spotlighting Oklahoma Oral History Project. Mr. Cherrington, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with when and where you were born.
I was born in Charleston, West Virginia on July 21st, 1970.
And did you grow up in Charleston?
No, I was born there, and I think we moved within a month. I don't really remember.
Right.
But, moved back to Tulsa immediately thereafter and grew up there.
Okay. Tell me about your parents. What did they do for a living?
My father was a geophysicist with Helmut Campaign in Tulsa for the duration. He died, I think, when I was 13. My mother, she was a homemaker. She had plenty to do raising my brother and I. So,
Yeah, older brother or younger?
5 years older.
They bully you at all?
No, older brothers never do that.
So talk a little bit about growing up in Tulsa. What did you do as a child for fun?
All the basic things that kids did back in the 70s: play football, baseball, wrestled,
Cool.
Go camping, hunting, just all the standard Oklahoma things.
Were you in the Eagle Scouts or
No.
Boy Scouts? No?
I think I made it through Cub Scouts, and then between football, baseball, stuff like that, it kind of took precedence.
So did you go to college on an athletic scholarship or anything like
No, I went to college basically by saving up enough money after working for a semester, and then went and figured it out after that with student loans and grants and aid and everything.
So your father obviously was college educated, but did anyone in your family serve in the military?
No.
No.
I was the first in my family to go to college other than my dad, and then was first to serve in the military. So I was breaching new ground each time.
All right. Where did you go to college?
Went to Oklahoma State from 89 to 95. Started out pre-med and then went into mechanical aerospace engineering, and finally graduated after a long, arduous trip.
What led to the change in your major? What decisions led to that?
I figured out that my memory wasn't that good, so I couldn't memorize stuff for pre-med work. Basically, chemistry, inorganic chemistry, I think, kind of showed me that mechanical engineering might be easier. It wasn't.
No. So at what point did you become interested in flight and airplanes?
Ever since I was a little kid, I either wanted to be a doctor or fly planes. I figured if I did mechanical engineering or aerospace engineering, I could either design stuff to go into people and fix them, or design and fix planes. So
Interesting.
the first one didn't work out. Went to the backup.
It's a nice backup plan.
So it worked out.
Yeah. So what was OSU like during that time?
It was where I tell people I really grew up. I basically put myself through college, and I lived in the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity for the first 2 or 3 years, and lived off campus after that. Had 2 or 3 roommates, but that was really my maturing period, I guess, of my life.
Were you a bachelor during that time?
Oh yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into the military, your path to the military.
Went through Det 670 here at Oklahoma State University. Did a 4-year program in ROTC. Got my commission in 95, and had a few hiccups there. I had a motorcycle wreck that they were going to amputate my right leg, and I've got some retained hardware, some plates and screws holding my ankle and arm together.
Wow.
So that I lost my initial pilot slot, but then once I got into a few waivers, they let me come on as an aerospace engineer. So that my first assignment was out at Edwards, California, at Edwards Air Force Base, and I worked at the Phillips laboratory there.
And what were your duties working there?
I was, everybody's going to laugh, but I was a bona fide rocket scientist. My official title was a liquid systems cryogenic engineer.
Wow.
So basically, instead of working on solid rocket boosters, I worked on liquid rockets, which you'd find in the space shuttle. So we were working on a program called the X-33 that was supposed to be the replacement for the space shuttle.
Wow.
So that was another part of my childhood dream, working around the SR-71 and B-2, B-1, F-117. Edwards Air Force Base is one of the clearinghouses for all test pilot school and everything. So even though I was working up at the rocket lab, I was still around all the coolest planes at the time that were there. I started my private pilot's license here at Stillwater, and then finished it out at Edwards Air Force Base, and that was one of the coolest things, having to give way to the SR-71 on a 20-mile final as I'm flying around my little 152. So that was a pretty neat experience.
Absolutely. How long were you there at Edwards?
I was at Edwards Air Force Base for about 3 years. Continued to apply for pilot training, pilot slots, and finally got a Navy doctor to sign off on me. He couldn't get any Air Force doctor to sign off on me because of the retained hardware. They said we got plenty of other applicants that aren't broke. So I went to a Navy doctor, and he basically asked me, "Son, you want to fly for the Navy?" And I was like, "No, sir." He signed the paperwork, handed it back to me, and said, "Good luck, have fun." So I got my waivers, and I got picked up for pilot training. Left in '98. I'd been at Edwards Air Force Base from '95 to '98, and went to pilot training in '98.
Where did you go?
Went to Columbus, Mississippi. Went through T-37 training there. They'd asked me what I wanted to fly, and I told them I wanted to fly A-10s or AC-130 gunships. And they said, "So you have an interest in special operations?" I was like, "Yes, I actually wanted to be a combat controller one time." So they said, "Congratulations, you just volunteered for the helicopter slot." And that's not exactly what I said, but okay. I saluted smartly and went off to Fort Rucker, Alabama. Everybody affectionately knows it as Mother Rucker. That's where all the rotor heads or helicopter pilots go. Went through there, finished out, got picked up for the MH-53 PAVLO. It was at the time it was a kind of an experimental process. To go into special operation, you used to have at least 1,000 hours of prior major weapon system flight time. As they started drawing down and they were running out of people, they decided to start taking what they called a pipeline guy, straight through T-37's Huey training and into special operations. And I was one of 2 guys that got selected for that particular year.
So they were still flying the Hueys during this
Yes.
time?
Normal track, you could either get a UH-1 Huey, MH-60 Pavehawk, or a MH-53 PAVLO.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the training process for helicopter flight.
For helicopter, well, coming from T-37s, that was a very regimented, strict, very well rehearsed program. They knew what they were doing, they knew what they were looking for, and you either made the cut or you didn't. So once you did what they call a track select from that, you either went to Hueys, T-38s, or T-1s, fire track or heavy track. And once you got over to the Army side or the UH-1 side of the house, it was more of a what they called a big boy program, where it wasn't very regimented. It wasn't as regimented. They didn't get you up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You have to report in and you were there till 6 o'clock at night. It was, here's the program, you need to show up and be here on time and be prepared. So it was a little bit different style or technique, which was easier for me because I knew what I wanted to do, I knew what I needed to do, and I didn't just let me alone, let me do it.
So a little bit more independent during that time.
Definitely.
So how long was that training process?
From the start, tweets, it's about 6 months, and then about roughly 6 months for Hueys also. So about a year process for that to get picked up and go to PAVLO training. And that was another move, another year of training, and that was being one of the only pipeline guys to come into the PAVLO training. It wasn't necessarily welcomed with open arms. Most everybody else there was high time experience, transfers from the Army Task Force or something like that. They had a lot more experience. So when I stepped in as a new guy, they were like, "Oh, so you flew Hueys before?" And I was like, "Well, I went through the schoolhouse." And I'm like, "Well, what did you do before that?" "I flew tweets, T-37s." "Oh, you're an instructor in T-37s." "No, I went to T-37 training, went to Huey training, and now I'm here." And they're like, "Oh, you're that guy." It's like, you mean that in a good way, right? And they're like, "Well, we'll send you to Korea, or we'll send you someplace else to get some experience, but right now, good luck, and we'll get you in here flying when we can." So that was a very different experience.
So a little bit of animosity there.
Yeah, they didn't like the guy coming in with no experience to try to be there for them.
And so did they send you to get the experience at that point?
Yeah.
No? So you stayed in?
I did a year of training at Albuquerque, New Mexico. Once I graduated from that, went to Squadron Officer School. I was, at the time, I think it was about 2 months. So went from all this fire hose effect of flying training to taking 2 months off, and then right back to the squadron and showing up to that welcome of, "Oh, you're the new guy, and you haven't flown for 2 months, so you're rusty, you're not very good, and now you're my problem to deal with," is basically how the commander saw it when I stepped in. But that my experience, I come in and volunteer to fly what they called FCF flights, functional control flight, maintenance flights. I do that on the weekends to get extra experience. Learn from all the old guys, and every Friday and Saturday night that they were flying, I was there on the line. Flying Friday night, not many people like to do, but that's what I volunteered to get the experience. For once you're in special operations, MH-53s, we typically would take off at sunset, fly for 6 to 8 hours, something like that, and then come back and land at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's very much all nighttime on night vision goggles, that type of thing. So not many people wanted to be out Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So I got a lot of flight time.
Did you have instrument training during that time?
Oh, we had tons. If there was an instrument to be had, the MH-53 had it. So between radar systems, forward-looking infrared, any type of inertial navigation system, INS, Doppler, GPS, it was all on there. So it's a very intensive, not hard aircraft to fly or learn. It was just, there was so much of it.
So after that training process, where did you go from there?
After I finished Albuquerque, New Mexico, I was selected to go down to the 20 Special Operations down at Hurlburt Field, Florida. And from there, spent maybe 6 months, 8 months before 9/11 happened. 9/11 happened, and I was one of the first crews that went out the door. I think I found myself on the ground in Masir, Oman on September 22nd. So they basically shoved us in the back of a C-17 and off we went. We had no real insight to our destination. We just knew that we were leaving.
Was that a volunteer mission?
Just by the nature of being there, it was volunteer. Everybody was, after 9/11 happened, I just had my son. My wife walked in. I was leaving to go to work. She said, my mom called and said that a plane hit the World Trade Center. I was like, that didn't happen by chance. That's a huge mistake for somebody to make, and no pilot would ever do that. So there's something else going on here. Reported in, and they immediately locked down the base and everything. We went on high alert, so we knew something was going on. We basically either sequestered there at the squadron or kept on a pager. I got paged, told that I was on one of the crews, and my wife didn't know where I was going. She just knew I was leaving.
How did you guys prepare for that?
That's something that the community has a very good thing, or an established process for. You need to have all of your finances, your home life, everything squared away, just like you would for a hurricane. Not only the physical preparedness, but the mental and the spiritual, and every facet of it, being totally prepared to just walk out the door, and you knew everything was going to be fine at home because you'd prepared everything at home well enough, just like you'd prepared to fly. So my wife actually helped me pack up my stuff, and I said goodbye, and I don't think I talked to her for about 2 months.
Wow.
So it was, she just got to where she wouldn't watch the TV, wouldn't watch the news or anything, because nothing good was ever coming out of the news.
That's true today. So was there a community of wives and family as a support network for your wife and your newborn son?
Yeah, definitely. I lived on Eglin Air Force Base, and 2 or 3 of the other families lived there also. So they had a very strong, tight-knit group. All the wives would get together, and kids would play. To this day, we're still lifelong friends. The husbands would go off and fly together, or go TDY and deploy, and the wives would all go get babysitters and have the girls' night out, or have the little kids over and playing together.
Right. So take us through your first deployment. What was your mission?
First one out the door, I could say I was definitely not prepared. Well, I was as prepared as I could be, but being prepared for what I thought I was getting into, or what was going to happen, I had no clue. Like I said, we basically were out the door. We were on the ground in Masiromon, I think on September 22nd. We immediately started building up the aircraft. We landed, and it was just a big piece of rock. They basically said, there's a hangar, grab some mosquito netting and a cot, and you're going to sleep here tonight. We'll start building some tents and building up, well, we're building up the helicopters. You guys will be building you some tents to sleep in. We did that for 2 days, and then we jumped up from there onto a ship. Rode around on the ship for about a week while everything was still kind of being hammered out on what was going to happen. We launched off the ship opening night, in between all the TLAMs and everything that was launching out of the sea, in between what was called a ball period. They would launch a TLAM set, and then we'd take off, and it was kind of a neat experience to be looking in the tail gunners and stuff, be looking off in the distance saying, we got something approaching us at a really quick co-altitude. We need to come up about 10 feet and watch a TLAM go by, because they didn't figure out that they flew so much faster than we did, and they didn't necessarily give us the amount of time flying at 120 knots to get on shore and get landed. So it was a little exciting there for a little bit.
So a little on-the-job training with that.
Definitely.
Was that the first time you had taken off from a ship, from an aircraft carrier?
It was a LHA. It was a little bit smaller than a aircraft carrier, so it probably had 7 to 8 spots. And yeah, it was the first time I'd ever seen a ship. They kind of married up the crews and built them that way that they would have one guy that at least seen a ship or landed on one before him. Then they'd marry him up with a new guy or somebody that wasn't necessarily qualified in ships. And that was how they tried to do, I guess, a safety scrub of, well, we've only got 5 guys that are qualified for ships and we got 6 aircraft going out the door. How are we going to make this happen? And that was one of the best things that I liked about special operations. And a lot of other parts of the Air Force, there seems to be a clear-cut reg to tell you how you can't accomplish something. And special operations, it was more, give me the mission, I'll figure out how to do it, and then I'll figure out what regs are going to cover it. So where there's that black and white, there's a very large gray area there that you can operate within. And then if you've got a good enough reason to accomplish the mission, you've done your risk mitigation to get around it, then okay, that regulation is it's written by a person.
Right.
That person may not have been in this specific situation.
Right.
So now we're going to do what it takes to get the mission done. We're going to do it as safe as possible.
How many people on each aircraft? How many crew members?
A typical crew, we would have, there were 6 air crew. So you'd have a pilot, and engineer, or 2 pilots and engineer, and then 3 scanners or gunner positions.
And during that time, did you stay with the same crew?
We would try, as best as possible, you're trying to be hard crewed, or you would stay with that whole crew due to illnesses, guys not making it, different things. Sometimes you'd have to have a fill-in or somebody to augment that crew.
So tell me about your missions. Take me through the first mission in which you experienced a high level of danger. Besides taking off and landing from a ship.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone that we were, after 9/11, we had no clue what we were going to meet, where we were going to meet it, or when.
Right.
So, just coming off of Massera, going into the ship, are we going to be able to find the ship? We were doing all this blacked out and no comms because we didn't know who was listening to what. So, and then going from the ship into Pakistan. First mission in there, we'd never seen the site. Going into Jacobabad, Pakistan, we knew there was a facility there. We just didn't know who necessarily controlled it. So we landed into a big dust cloud there. Basically, started calling it home, set up shop, and went from there. We ran quite a few alert cycles where we'd call them town hall meetings at the time. At the time, it was our squadron commander was still taking care of things, but the person that was there with us was Lieutenant Colonel Kingsley, and he would call a town hall meeting and he's like, okay, I need you guys to get in your flight suits and get ready to fly as soon as possible without making a lot of commotion and scaring everybody else. But our Pakistani general contact has told us that his forces are losing control in the city, and there's a mob headed this way to take over the city because they know, or take over the base because they know Americans are here. And that's kind of the first time that you're going like, how is this going to happen? What are we? There is no standard operating procedure for that mission.
Right.
So they said, all right, well, you guys will take off. You'll have 2 helicopters doing gun runs to keep the bad guys on the outside. and give C-130s time enough to load up as many people as we can. We'll do runs to get them out of here. Okay, we had Pakistani military and police that were supposed to be our first wave of defense, and then we had some Marines that was the next wave of defense. How do we know who the bad guys are that are coming if they're all running back, falling back to our position? Well, they're the ones that are shooting the other way. They're shooting in the wrong direction. Sounds good. We got a plan. So,
Were the Pakistani military, were they not in uniform?
they were, but in most foreign countries, whether it's Pakistan, Afghanistan, it's who's paying the most that day as to who they're really aligned with.
Right.
In the tribal regions, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We fly in one day, make some good friends, drink some tea, and make some payoffs, and we come in there, land a week later, and get shot at because some Al Qaeda or somebody had been in there and paid them a little bit more to shoot at us. So that was always a touchy. Probably I guess I should answer your question of the most fearful mission first time. Didn't really realize it until after we were back and shut down. But we'd gone in to take some guys in across Highway 1 for the first time into Afghanistan. There are teams to go in there to do some reconnaissance and just figure out what was going on. Made it there the whole way, flying at 10 to 20 feet off the ground. Standard answer though is 50 feet was our lowest altitude, but we'd pop up over the power lines to cross those. Made it in, made it out. Nobody knew we were there until we got back into Pakistan, and it just so happened this one region, the Pakistani general had told us, he goes, "Yeah, my guys don't even fly in that region. That's a bad region. You don't want to go there." That would have been good information to know prior to flying over. Your spidey senses, the hair on the back of your neck would kind of stand up as you go in country, but as you fenced out and came out of country, you don't necessarily let your guard down, but you kind of take that sigh of, okay. And then we started getting shot at. That first experience of getting shot at, again, hadn't really ever, they can do simulations and stuff, but it's not the same until it happens.
Right.
And that whole slow time expansion, I remember it vividly. I was flying, just cruising along at 50 feet, and I saw what I described as either Folgers coffee can or a basketball, that it just, everything kind of, we were chalked to, got to use your hands if you're a pilot, flying behind lead, and I watched it come up in slow motion and go in between the flight, and I was like, phew. And I started looking underneath my goggles because everything in your goggles was either green or white or black. So I looked under and saw the glow as the second one went up. And I was like, I kind of leaned up and I was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "They're shooting at us. Brake left now." I heard that just over the intercom, so I was like, "Oh God." About that time, we had about 50 positions of AK-47 rounds start firing at us also. So it was back on all the training and the natural instinct. We just started working together as a crew. Lead was doing the same thing. Everybody broke to the left, came down, got from 50 feet down to 10 feet, and we just maneuvered out of it and got over a ridge line, and we saw all the fire and everything going over top of the rotor system. And well, that was fun. That's kind of interesting. Like, what? Our tail gunners, as we both came up and broke both side positions, We had 7.62 miniguns on each side. They make a very distinctive hum when they go on high rate. Tail gunners, they were shooting 50 cal Modus machine guns, and they were hitting positions. I think they were some of the first confirmed kills because the large firing positions, they ceased, and at least probably 10 of the AK-47s stopped firing. So that was a lot of training to come into maybe a 15-second engagement that I think ended up being about 30-second engagement. But for us to position the aircraft, for them to shoot and return fire and eliminate targets, it all came together as a one crew mission.
So your training up to that point had almost developed instinctive muscle memory to
That's all it
combat
was.
that?
There was a harmony between 6 guys that, well, in reality 12 guys because of the other aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
We all worked together and brought everybody back home. After we got over that edge of a ridge line, everybody kind of took the breath, and they're like, all the older experienced guys that had been in Desert Storm, Grenada, places like that.
Right.
They're like, everybody check yourself. So I'm flying like, check myself, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, because the adrenaline would rush and you'd never know you'd be hit. And usually the guys that we lost, they get hit underneath their body armor. But all worked out. All the teams that we had in the back, nobody was hit. We get back on the ground, shut down. They start doing chalk marks on the aircraft. It's like, chalk marks, what are they doing? Oh, those are the bullet holes that they are confirming that they're going to have to replace the sheet metal. Mm-hmm. And on that one, I think that particular one, I think there were 12 bullet holes in the, well, either shrapnel or bullet holes.
Wow.
So that was when the whole realization of, holy crap, this is the second night. And that's when you start going, we just got here.
Right.
This is the very first, and my orders say I'm going to be here 180 days. So that was the first. The fear didn't set in during the event. It was after the realization of like, wow, we just made it through that.
Right.
So that was the very first time.
So you were based in Pakistan during that time?
At that time, yeah.
And what you were describing earlier sounded like a bribery culture, where your ally is based on payment and things like that. Would that be accurate?
It was more, not necessarily bribery, but it is anything in life. What can I do to help you? What can you do to help me? So it wasn't necessarily a cash payment. It may be I've hauled around goats and chickens.
Right.
Soccer balls. I've been to places where you go in with 20 or 30 soccer balls and a couple of nets. You land and you go to the local orphanage and you play soccer with the kids. And there you've got lifelong friends that U.S. military can go in there anytime now. And they're like, yes, come play soccer with us.
Right.
I don't know if I got the accent right, but
right. So, back to this mob scene. How did the military handle that situation? Were the mob members, were they armed with AK-47s? Were they?
Oh, on a nightly basis, different cultures. It's there in the city of Jacobad. There were a lot of celebrations, weddings, or whatever, but they were always firing guns in the air.
Right.
And they knew just as much. We were there, and we were watching them. We had our snipers watching into the city, making sure people weren't coming. Well, they had snipers on the rooftops also watching what we were doing. And that was one of their kind of feel out and see what was going on. They'd make an announcement on the radio, or we would pick up some type of communication, and that was how they would watch how we responded. So there was no, at that particular time, the very first time, there was no real mob.
Oh.
It was just one of their techniques to, let's see how they respond.
Right.
What are they going to do? And through other chatter on the radios, we figured out, our intel guys figured out that it was nothing.
So they were filling you out.
They were filling us out. The Pakistani military, they were there covering. They said, yeah, we got this. We'll let you know. There was a couple of times that some American reporters showed up at the gate that kind of incited a riot, which, again, in different countries, they deal with things in a much more harsh manner. Somebody steals something, they cut off their hand, or they cane them, or something like that. Well, when this particular mob didn't cease and desist and go away, the Pakistani general just pulled out his weapon, eliminated one person, and the crowd dispersed. The problem was done.
Wow. So it seems to me that you had a lot of experience interacting with civilian populations during that time. Would that be true? Did you interact personally with civilians?
Not necessarily. We would have some of our contacts. I didn't necessarily see them as a civilian population, but they were, I guess. My main job was take things, people, beans, bullets, whatever needed to go into a place, drop it off, come back and get it as necessary, and do that again. That was the simple oversimplification of it,
Right.
but that's how, when we would get some people that were a little too engrossed in what they thought they did for a job, and I said, in reality, we drive the short bus that takes the crazy little kids in to do their job, and then we come back and pick them up, and that's it. Point A to point B. Don't get over glorification of it.
What was the standard of living to what you saw as far as the populations in Pakistan?
They have a much simpler life. It's definitely a third world country. When they make those jokes about bombing somebody back into the Stone Ages, well, if they already live there, then you're not really taking anything away from them. So, different cultures with different experiences. One of the things I knew when I got back to the United States, one of the neatest things, or one of the things I didn't realize I'd miss, was having a porcelain toilet to use. So their standard was a little different, and didn't involve a porcelain toilet. Kind of reasons why they don't shake with certain hands. So that was something, again, I wasn't prepared for. But that was the standard there, normal.
And you were there 180 days?
No, they'd always send us out the door with orders that say 180 days, so they can keep us there however long they need. That was just a standard. We actually made it back the first time right before Christmas. I think I got back December 20th. And that was at the point where I'd lost about 20 pounds. Hadn't seen the light of day in 2 months, so it kind of lost a little my sunburn or my tan, and I'd grown a full beard because, again, with some of those intel reports, they said, if you're clean shaven and you don't have a beard, they see you as a little boy and they will treat you as such, and they don't treat little boys the same they do as men. So if you don't have facial hair, you're not considered a man. That's just some of the intel reports that we had. The same way with being a helicopter pilot, they didn't necessarily like helicopter pilots from the when Iran, Iraq wars, and the Russians were coming into Pakistan, Afghanistan. They would just come in there and mow out whole villages with helicopters.
Wow.
So they really did not like helicopter pilots, and they said they would basically gut you from stem to stern. So stick a knife in your groin and go up to your throat, and then let you sit there and basically choke to death as you watch yourself die.
Absolutely.
So this is something they would tell you right before you went to fly. And you're like, okay, great, let's try to make this one right and not let that happen.
So, what did you do during your time off besides sleep? Well, I guess the better question is, how many missions would you fly on a weekly routine?
When you deploy, there is no routine for flying. Other jobs I've had when I'm deployed, or the larger support agencies, those jobs you'll have a standard 12 on, 12 off, something like that. With us flying, you lost total track of time, days. All you knew is that the sun goes down, it's time to get up and let's go either plan a mission, help somebody else plan a mission, or go fly a mission. And sun comes up, well, it's time to go work out, eat something, go to sleep. So the days just ran into one another, and you never really knew how long you were there or what day it was. You just knew it was the next day to work.
It seems like that was an extreme adjustment. I mean, coming from pre-9/11 to this routine structure to absolutely, well, it sounds like no routine. How did you adjust with that?
They like to say it's surge, so you surge to that, or it's not a marathon, or it's not a sprint, it's marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for us, especially early on, it was a sprinting marathon. Every day was go. That's why a lot of people lost so much weight. You'd get so ingrained in, okay, if we don't all make it back, then we can't, do the mission. If we can't get the mission done, then we don't all make it back. So that was just kind of the mentality. Everybody was all in to get it done. So you very rarely knew that you sitting there at a computer planning a mission, and somebody like, hey, why don't you go take a break and get some sleep? When's the last time you got some sleep? I don't know, a couple days ago, I guess.
Right.
So you just went until you couldn't go. You crash for a couple hours, get some sleep, do it again.
It sounds dangerous.
It was just, we did what it took.
Right. Did you guys lose any men during that time?
The first go, we lost a few. That was probably the worst part of it was going in and picking up body bags, picking up guys, because you'd either just talk to them, planned it, but you'd have to land at a crash site, and you knew there wasn't any survivors. You just had to get to where, it's part of doing business. It sucks, but we can't really get to a point where that grieving period had to happen in a very short time. So that just fueled the fire to, that one guy just cost you $1,000. That was just kind of the mentality of the way you had to look at it.
So there was like a retribution mentality with the loss of fellows. I hear a lot of that in other.
I don't know if it was necessarily retribution, but payback.
Right.
So you want to make the other guy die for his country, not you die for yours.
Right.
So we were trying to help them do that in a much more expedient manner.
Right. After your first deployment, whenever you came back home, how did you reintegrate to daytime living and family adjustment? Was there any adjustment problems?
There always is. There always will be, because came back home in the middle of the night. They called our wives, told them that we were coming back. Again, this is 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. The wife's got to find a babysitter, somebody. They're just not that readily available
Right.
at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So met her coming out the gate and pulled up beside her, waved at her, and she did what we trained to do. If you ever run into any problems, you drive to the nearest military gate and get out and start pointing. He's the one that's trying to rape me or something.
Right.
She did that, but she drove all the way from Eglin to Hurlburt with me beside her, chasing her. She didn't recognize me with having a beard and losing 20, 30 pounds. I was pale white, so she's like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" It's like, "It's still me." But that adjustment period, yeah, you go from your values, you value fruit or toilet paper or being able to take a bottled water shower. That's what was, the niceties. You kind of saw what really valued, or what was of value, and that was the guy beside you, or the guy you flew with, or the guys you were putting in, who you were getting back. Were we making a difference? Those were your values. You come back and the values are, well, I don't like Pepsi, I only like Coke.
Right.
It is a little different focus. So, you go to living on your own and just living to stay alive, to coming back and you see how messed up people's values are. It's hard to make that readjustment. And of course, life went on back here at home without you.
Right.
It had to. And that's how you had to prepare it. But you have a completely other life that you just went and did for 2, 3, 6 months, however long it was. So your lives are always and will forever be parallel at that point. So you can make as many chances or amends, special trips, take the kids on vacation stuff to try to get those lives back together, but they always continued on a parallel because there are things that they will never know what you did, and there's stuff that happened back at home that you'll never know. So,
How did you communicate with your wife during that first deployment?
I think the first deployment, I maybe talked to her 3 times.
Wow.
But I mean, the way I kind of got through that was that was a luxury that guys in Vietnam, they got letters from home maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks or a month or something. In World War II, people go away for years and not come home. So it was like, gosh, this is, we've got the internet. You can get on there and shoot a quick email, and if they happen to be up, or you get one back. So that was, we had 4 computers that were set up for probably 70 to 100 people to use. So you go in there and you get 5 minutes, and just trying to log on would be about 3 minutes of that. You download an email or read it real quick, maybe shoot one off, and your time's up. But that was the process. So that was it. You didn't have time to worry about really what was going back home. You knew everything was fine, and that was basic communication. Hey, I'm okay. Everybody I'm with is good to go. I'll talk to you when I can. And that was a quick email to let him know, all right, he's still alive. Can't tell me where he's at, but everything's fine. And I can tell all the wives that I know he's with that they're okay from what we know.
Did you find trouble in the beginning expressing your experiences to non-combatants, to civilians? Do you still have a...
Yeah, they'll never, unless you've been there, you'll never understand, you'll never know. It's just different. It's still kind of sometimes difficult, but you find a way to work through it.
And have you dealt with any psychological problems upon reintegration from your combat experiences?
I would say no more than anybody else has had to deal with. I mean, comparing it to a policeman or a fireman. Fireman's got to run into a burning building, and if there's bodies there, he's got to step around, step through, step on to get to a live one. He's going to do it, but coming out of that, that's an experience that nobody usually has or does, and it's hard to explain when you step in the middle of something that crunches and it happens to be a guy's chest. You just can't really understand that until you've done it, and there's no real way to prepare you. And that's what I've tried to tell a bunch of the cadets here, or the guys that I've talked to, is that PTSD is a real thing, and the only way that I know, how it's going to affect me how it's going to affect you is how much you've prepared for it, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, on every level, to be able to do those things or be able to deal with it. So I try to compare everything, all the worst or the hardest experiences, 2 days in football, 3 days in football, wrestling practice till you puke your guts up, to wrap that into hunting with gutting a deer and cleaning it to eat that meat. Wrap all that around it and then multiply that by 10, and that's what you need to be prepared for. And if it doesn't happen that bad, then you're fine. If it does, well, at least you're prepared somewhat.
Well, since 2001, over 10 years of American, or the United States military being at war, a lot of research has developed and a lot of processes have come into place since then. Was there a reintegration process during that time? Did you have a time where a downtime before you got to interact with your families?
Each time was different as they try to make progress.
Right.
Again, unless they've been there and done that, it's hard to prepare people. So just first 2 or 3 times I came home in the middle of the night. No fanfare, no welcome, just glad to be home. Matter of fact, the first time we had a person there with, I think it was a bleach and alcohol, some type of mixture that they were spraying our boots as we got off the aircraft because of some fear of something we were bringing back to the United States. So they were spraying our boots with this mixture. Like, what is this? We've been living there for the last, and now we get off the plane, you're spraying us down with this? Okay, whatever. So we just get out of the way, we want to go home. So yeah, it was a little strange. To last time I came home in 2010, they got the whole welcome home parade, or the plane lands, they got all the families, they're all there, all the wives and girlfriends are all dressed up, all the kids are dressed up, and you come through the line and the wing commander welcomes you back, and then you get sequestered and you have to spend mandatory time, and the commander's got to talk to you, welcome you back officially, and then they release you. Right. Then you got to come back and fill out all your paperwork and travel vouchers and give blood, and that hasn't made it any better. It's just now delaying the time that I get to spend with my family. I'm now home, but I can't spend any time with them until I get all this other stuff done. So, is it any better? I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to help, and it takes the individual going there and saying, "Hey, I need help."
So, throughout your career, how many deployments have you made to combat zones?
I think it was 10 total, but one of them to Haiti, they didn't count as a deployment because it was only 27 days instead of the required 30 days to be considered a deployment. So that one, 9.5.
What was your mission in Haiti?
Haiti in 2004, we had an individual down there that was in charge that called and requested help. He needed to, his embassy was being overran and he needed out, so he called us. We went down to get him. He ended up somewhere in Africa, I think. A gentleman named Aristide. It was funny to hear it come out in the news that we had kidnapped him and he was gone. But I think it all got straightened out in the news. We were sitting in Guantanamo Bay watching the news and kidnapped. That guy is lying through his teeth. But, we went down there. There was an uprising. They ousted the government. Again, we went down there to put people in and bring people out. And basically, just make nice with the locals and see who was really in charge at the time, and try to be friends with them.
Right. Well, if we were to take each deployment, it would take hours. Is there a specific deployment you'd like to discuss?
No one in particular. They all, it's same thing. Go and put people in, bring them out. Just different place between Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa. They're all another place to do a job. Probably the worst would be Afghanistan, just because of the environment that we dealt with, from the dust and the unknown, dealing with the Northern Alliance, whether they were going to be your friends that day or not, not being able to trust your host nation counterparts, whether they were going to roll a grenade into your tent, or shoot at you when you came in. That was always that fear of the unknown. That kind of sucked. But probably the worst environment for the flying conditions is Afghanistan. The worst environment for living conditions is probably Djibouti, Africa, just because it's no kidding Africa hot there. You look on your tent thermometer and be at 137 outside, and you knew your air conditioner could only cool it 20 degrees inside, so it's 117 inside, and you're like, I couldn't wait to get in the tent because it's cool in here. It's 117. So, and that we'd sleep during the day, so you just basically end up waking up in a pool of sweat. And you got used to it.
What was it like during Iraq? Were you there during the invasion force or during the occupation time?
The first missions that we ran into Iraq, I'd been in Djibouti, Africa as a pre-staging build-up, and then we jumped into Iraq once all of the planning and everything was done. So some of the first missions that were securing the Al-Faw Peninsula and all the oil refineries and the oil rigs and everything out there, taking in SEAL teams to, make sure they weren't going to cause some type of environmental disaster. That was all of the first early on missions that we had. Securing the dams, I think it was Kajaki Dam, those that they were fearful that they were going to blow up the dam and then flood the region and wipe out all the civilian population. So those are some of the first things that we did before it came out that we were going in to invade or really secure the area.
Right. So you were there in the beginning, toward the drive to Baghdad, then.
That's usually we were there way before the drive to Baghdad. usually for just in general special operations forces, whether it's, I say that all-encompassing joint fashion, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, we've all had to, they've either had to ride on a ship or ride in a plane to get there on the ground. So we all work together, and before you hear about it in the news, we've already been there either at least a month or 6 months to a year. All of the regions that are in the news now, we've already had people there working with our host nation counterparts for the entire time. So that's how special operations is just there to make sure the world's a safer place, and we've already got something set up for when Big Blue or Big Green needs to come in.
So in your experience, what are some of the more positive aspects of war? If it can be described in that manner.
Some of the positives, it wasn't always just going over to, for us to be called in, it was kind of the time for, you need us to go in and kill people and break things, blow stuff up. But that's one of the good things, I think, for us, that instead of becoming so numb to just that day in, day out, everybody's a bad guy, we would go into some of the villages and I think I mentioned earlier playing soccer with some of the orphanages, going into the city of Djibouti and meeting with some of the elders there and building floors in their schools, just because they didn't have the supplies or the knowledge or the equipment to do it. We'd bring all of these pallets of wood to put floors in, and there was guys there with hand saws and files, very rudimentary equipment. We'd show up with table saws and skill saws and stuff, and sawzalls, and zip through and put a floor in a day, and they were just amazed. So some of those that nation building things, it's not always just over there, blowing up their houses or killing civilians. It's more, it reminded us that we were actually there fighting for them. Not everybody was a bad person, and it definitely would teach you a little bit about bartering. Not necessarily the bribery piece of it, but they're very good negotiators. But when you're negotiating over a couple of chickens, it's kind of brings you back to that. Really, what are these in the United States? A couple of chickens, you can get that from Kentucky Fried Chicken for $20. You go there and they see those chickens as a resource. So you give them chickens and then you throw one in, like, oh, you're the best guy ever. So making some of those friends, generally, even when we've had hard landings, because helicopters and PAVLOs never crash, we only have hard landings. That's just an inside joke. We've had irrecoverable helicopters and had individuals broken backs, broken ankles, and the villagers come out and render aid or offer, a place of refuge to come in, get warm, get out of the snow, have some tea. I think I probably drank some of the sweetest rice tea and ate some of the neatest little sandwiches with all the crust cut off of it in Pakistan, where we'd had some issues, and the locals brought it out on their finest china and served it to us. So as we're sitting there, wondering, okay, who's going to shoot us and who's not, and who do we shoot first? But hey, let me get some more of that tea. So
Right.
That was kind of a neat experience. And then again, you come back home and your neighbors are fighting because they don't agree with that person just got a BMW and they park it in the street, and you're just amazed that this is what you guys are fighting over.
Right.
One, you can't afford a BMW, and what does it matter if it's parked in the street? I was thankful to have the porcelain toilet and some toilet paper. Now this is what we're concerned about. So
I'm really interested in your insight into what American society or the government can do to improve the way the rest of the world views us. What steps need to be taken to improve American relations with foreign countries?
That's a tough one. They've got whole think tanks out there devoted to coming up with that. But I would say most of the countries out there that I've dealt with, they see America as dollar signs. Every time we go in someplace, they're like, pay me. How much? I want American dollars. You go in with euro or whatever the currency they were using at the time or wherever it was at, they knew you're American. It's kind of hard for me being the standard 6 foot tall, 200 pound white guy American. I don't blend well, no matter what I dress up in. So when they knew America was there, they want American dollars. How to change that? I don't think you ever will, because everybody wants the American dream. They want to be able to come here and have the 2-story house and I don't know how many kids it is now, 2.4 kids that you're supposed to have, and the white picket fence. And the American dream's changed now to where it's just everybody wants the money and the big house and nice cars.
You have personally sacrificed at least an aspect of your life in the defense of, Iraq, for example. And then now recently, Iraq has the current situation with ISIS, and the government that the United States helped to create is falling apart. What are your impressions on that? How did that affect you personally?
It didn't affect me, other than maybe some sort of job security. I know no matter how much we continue to draw down or kick people out, there's that region has always been in conflict. Back to the Persians, that throughout history they've never been able to conquer or secure that area, and nobody really wants to. I don't see that we're going to go in there and really make any changes. Again, on a personal view, our involvement should be there to secure American interest and our allies. So now we need to figure out who our allies are and help them out or don't. That's a political aspect that people at a much higher paycheck than mine, a lot of strategery there that I'm not necessarily privy to or didn't have enough information to help. But I see between all of the Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, you move over to all the places that people don't necessarily hear about, in the Philippines or in Africa, and it's starting to come out about Mali, and we had Somalia in there for a little bit. Well, let these people deal with their own issues, and let's kind of keep our own interests at heart here. Will that happen? I doubt it, but we just keep on doing the job, and I don't know the good answer. If you probably talk back to the guys in Vietnam, they had some of the similar, we're here doing a job, we're doing what the country needs us to do, we're just not sure what that is at this point. What is the mission?
With so many recent veterans reintegrating back home and so many issues with families, and there's so many things that we hear about, suicides, things of that nature, domestic violence. How did your family deal with the problems that being deployed entails?
Again, you have to prepare for it before it happens. So the proper prior planning, I think that's the only way that, and my wife's a very strong person, she's very independent, so she's literally raised my family while I was gone. She pointed out, I think my daughter was 2 years old, and she said, you need to kind of see if you can throttle back here a little bit, because you've only seen her 6 months of her life, and that wasn't all at one time. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, a little wake-up call. So just trying to make different arrangements. Out of those 10 deployments, I probably picked up 2 deployments for other guys who had family issues. I said, I can cover for you, but that was probably to the detriment of my own family. And once my wife pointed that out, then I said, okay, I won't be the first guy to cover for someone else. So how that, I think one of the biggest issues, if you look at the amount of casualties from previous wars, the numbers were in the hundreds of tens of thousands. Mm-hmm. And now we have losses of maybe 2,000 to 3,000, and we're outraged. But it's an order of magnitude less, but it's because we're saving more people's lives. So now we have a order of magnitude larger wounded that are returning home, and where it used to be being shell shocked in World War II or right. to Vietnam, the homeless factors because they couldn't come back and reintegrate. Well, now we're starting to put more labels or names with it, with being traumatic brain injury. That's your shell shock, and the PTSDs. Those are the guys who can't necessarily come back and integrate. Right. So that's your Vietnam homeless guy, or we've got more of them because we've saved more of their lives. It's just now we got to make that next step for the next set of wars of how to rebuild that life and make them a productive member of society again.
Right.
We'll have to figure that. We figured out the medical piece of it. Now we've got to figure out the mental piece of it. And I don't know what makes one guy's experience affect him so much differently than another one. It's got to be something in the upbringing of that kid or that child. I've seen a guy beside me just totally freeze up and not be able to operate, communicate, anything. Get back on the ground and give him a couple of days to kind of deal with it, or talk to him and see, hey, what happened? And he'd be fine. We'd have other guys that said, you know what, it's not worth it. I can't do this anymore. And I would rather have somebody like that than somebody that would try it too. We had other people that would try to hide it. They'd be sick on that particular mission, or they'd hurt their knee, or couldn't fly, or something. And you're like, look, if you can't do this anymore, it's understandable. Just go do something else, but be productive. Plan a mission for us. Let us go fly it or something. There's no rhyme or reason. The biggest, toughest special operations guy on the ground can still have an issue if he isn't prepared for it. How does he prepare for it better than someone else? I think that's probably that magic pill or that magic training pipeline that we've got to figure out. Some of the biggest, toughest guys They've been in Desert Storm and other places. In Afghanistan, broke them. Others, I'd like to think that I've survived. I mean, haven't gone off the deep end. I say this joking because you can't now. If you mention anything about it, you're immediately somebody we got to start watching. But
Right.
I think having a strong religious background, mentally tough, and being able to kind of take things in perspective and laugh. You gotta laugh a lot of things off, and I tell people all the time, 90% of the time I'm joking around, and it's all fun and games. That 5% of the time you'll see a different tone, and then the other 5% when I'm serious, and then you'll definitely know that.
Right.
And there hadn't been too many people that have got to see that last 5%, but they definitely know that has occurred.
Right. In your missions, especially the extraction missions, you've seen a lot of the worst parts of war. How do you memorialize? Well, for example, with Vietnam, you have the Vietnam Memorial, which allows a lot of veterans to achieve some sort of closure. How do you remember individuals?
I think for us, because it's not over,
Right.
there isn't any real closure. It's just a continuance, and the guys that we've lost, we just drive on. Not necessarily forget, but you have to compartmentalize that. You put it in a little box and you stick that way in the back until it comes around at one time a year for 9 or 10 different times, and you. Some guys will go out on a motorcycle ride. Some guys will do a 5K run to raise funds for that guy's family scholarship. Other guys will go out and have a drink, have a party, smoke a cigar. And again, each individual's got to deal with it on their own, or how close they were to that event. And it's got to be an event as opposed to a person, because then it gets a little too close. So the only way you can really, again for me, the only way to really get through it or talk about it, it's an event, it's a mission that happened. You drive on through it.
I'd like to spend the last little bit of our interview talking about your roles here at OSU. What are some of the greatest highlights of your roles here at OSU?
Greatest highlight is coming back. That was kind of one of my overarching goals or desires in life, was to start out in the military and then actually come back here at some point and be the commander. And it's come to fruition. It's kind of amazing to be back. Being able to take some of the experiences that I've had over the last 18, 19 years and feed back into the next generation, that it's nice to be able to see that I have a chance to make a difference. Hopefully the missions and everything that I've done in the past, those were immediate response. Okay, everybody lived through this, we got back home, we accomplished the mission. This, I'm hoping, and I see it in the kid's face when that light bulb comes on, or you can see that gleam in their eye, that they get it. And the ones that want to be here, the ones that want to make a difference, they're continuing on. The others, I'm not a recruiter. They say everybody's a recruiter. I said, no, that person, if they have made it to this point in their life, any kind of recruiting should be over. They're making a decision. So I'm not a recruiter. I'm helping them to make the smartest decision so we don't waste the government's money, the Air Force money. We don't waste my time or theirs, because time is the only true commodity that we really have that you can't get back. Whether it's money or pieces and parts, you can't get time back. So investing in these kids today, either push them a little bit harder on a physical fitness test, or getting them hooked up with a tutor or one of their friends that's in their same classes to help them study and make them smarter, get a better grade. Teaching them networking and relying on each other, as opposed to sitting there and trying to do it on your own. We're trying to teach them that today. So that's the overall highlight. The rest of at the detachment here at OSU, Det 670, they're doing it themselves. I just sit back and take credit for everything they're doing.
Right. Is there anything throughout this interview that you wanted to talk about that you haven't had a chance to mention?
I got probably 1,000 more stories. I can talk your ear off on in particular missions, but again, with being on a timeline, you'll be old and gray like me.
With that said, whenever future generations look back on the War on Terror in the first decade of the millennium, what would you like them to learn from your personal experience?
Don't give up the fight. Whatever your ideals or beliefs, no matter whether it's on your personal level or on a national level, don't give up. And that's the same thing I tell all the cadets. If you want it bad enough, if you believe in it, you can look at yourself in the mirror and you know you're in the right, then don't give up. Just keep going until you don't have anything else to give. And then make sure that that next generation has got that same mentality. Otherwise, there's no reason to be here.
Absolutely. Well, as an American who's grown up in a peaceful society, I'd like to thank you for your contribution to your nation, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.